Hey everyone, this is Shane Grove, the host of the From the Shadows podcast. With me is Jason, the super producer.
Greetings, everyone.
And we just want to welcome you to, I think this is our very first best of episode. Is it not, Jason? I think it is.
Yeah, we've only had best of howlers.
Best of the Ozark Howler, yeah. So because we get so very little time off, we decided to take a little time off here for the 4th of July weekend and celebrate. I know Jason likes to set off a lot of illegal fireworks.
Shh,
okay.
Don't tell.
I'm sorry. I apologize. But so today's show for all our loyal listeners is kind of a best of, and we went through and found 4 different older episodes, picked out 10, 15 minutes out of each one of those episodes that we thought would be interesting. And hopefully, if the little part of the episode interests you, you guys can go back, find that episode, and listen to the whole episode.
We'll put the episodes in the description.
Yeah, we'll put the episodes.
So that way, whatever podcatcher you use, you can, go back and look through the other episodes and be able to find it.
So we got David Hensley talking about his experience with the Hatman.
Very, very good. Very exciting.
Got Nick Redfern talking about Blackeyedchildren.
One of my favorites.
Oh, I hate the Blackeyedchildren.
I like Nick Redfern. He's the best at no matter whatever he talks about. And check out his books too.
Yeah. We got Ken Gerhard talking a little. It was Bigfoot and some other stuff.
Predominantly
some other
Bigfoot
stuff. Ken Gerhard's another great. Yes. He was another great guest.
Yes,
and then Brian Bowden talking some Dogman stuff.
Yes.
And Bryan was a fantastic guest and told some great Dogman stories from some of his research. So we hope you guys enjoyed the little tidbits that we picked out for you guys to listen to. We hope you go check out those episodes in their entirety because they are. They're from some of our early days. So,
oh yes, they're from some of the early days of the podcast.
We're not as refined in those episodes as we are now.
And also, if you happen to hit one of your favorite episodes, share it with somebody. Yeah. Wherever you're listening to it off of, you hit that little square box with the arrow on it. And share that thing with another friend or something. That really helps us out because that pushes us up in the algorithm and puts us in front of a lot more fans, a lot more people of like minds, like you and myself.
Here I think maybe our fans just want to keep us all to themselves because they know how cool they really are.
No, we want to increase our base. Yes, we want more of us to think alike. That's how we're going to get answers, my friend.
Get answers. All right.
That's right.
So for getting, in the regards of getting answers, share it with your friends.
Share your favorite episodes or share your not favorite episodes.
Spend the 4th of July weekend around the grill. Tell Alexa you want to listen to
From the Shadows podcast,
the Ken Gerhard episode. It'll pull right up,
or the Nick Redfern,
or David Hensley, or Brian Bowden. Hey, whatever. But we just hope that you guys enjoy your 4th of July weekend
and keep it safe.
Keep it safe, and we'll be back next Friday with a brand new episode, and we don't even know which one. We've got so many good ones in the can. We don't even know which one we're going to put out next Friday, do we?
No,
we don't.
Yet.
We don't. So, but let us know what you think. We hope you enjoy it, and have a great 4th. And we'll talk to you guys again next week.
Yeah, eat a piece of barbecue chicken for me and Grover here, and possibly shoot off a bottle rocket for us. All right, have a good one. Enjoy your holiday.
So for me, it started, like I said, I was working at that time seasonally for Cedar Point in the park, and there was only a handful of people there, and it was kind of one of those cooler days, rainy, and we got out early on that Thursday, and I said, well, I'm just going to go home instead of staying in the dorms. I didn't feel like being alone and crappy, and there was nobody there from college to party with, so what's the sense of staying there? So I drove home, and usual night, normal, everything's normal, went to bed and said goodnight to my parents, and off to bed I went. Now, at that time, you have to understand, too, this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but there was a time period where I was terrified of thunderstorms. It's something from a childhood. just terrified. It would make me sick to my stomach even if there was a storm alert on TV. You know, it was kind of a joke. You could find Dave hiding in the basement in the corner with his helmet on and his bottled water. And I used to go around propping open all the doors in the house and the windows because it was a belief in the 60s that if you did that, the vacuum wouldn't blow up your house. So, yeah, I was terrified of storms. And
what kind of helmet did you have on?
Well, actually, it was a toy German helmet that Schultz wore, and like Schultz.
I know.
Schultz,
I know nothing.
Yep.
I know nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Hogan.
Exactly.
Hogan zeros.
But so I go to bed. I wake up probably about 3, maybe a little after in the morning, and I'm hearing a distant thunderstorm. And so I'm a little nervous, not too bad, but I lay there awake, again, kind of like the movie Poltergeist. It's kind of weird because like that kid, I was counting down the seconds of the thunder. And it became really intense and over about a period of 15 minutes. And at that point, I was, again, nervous. I was like, Mom should be up to go to work shortly, so I'm going to go out and make a pot of coffee and wait for her. So I sat up in bed, and there was a lightning strike outside my room. Really, like it hit the tree or even the house. It was so loud. And I kind of jumped and I'm again sitting on the side of my bed, but it startled me and I kind of jerked. But I looked at the window and there was a secondary flash of lightning, and through the curtains there was a silhouette of a man wearing a large, like a fedora style hat, a brimmed hat. That's all I could tell, but it was lit up like a backdrop. So I and I gasp and I turn in my bed. I just pivot my body to go get my stepdad and mom. And as I did that, at the foot of my bed was this thing or man. It filled about every inch of the ceiling. Up to the ceiling was about 7 foot tall ceiling. It was huge. He was draped in a cloak, kind of like Jack the Ripper. It had a high collar. Pure black face, perfectly black. I mean, blacker than black. It was almost as if it absorbed any light. And it was wearing a fedora-style hat, like a gangster hat or like Jack the Ripper, and I couldn't move. The fear was so strong, I literally couldn't move. My heart started banging like it was going to burst out of my chest. This thing then turns, and I could still see it in my mind, like a mechanical robot. It was creepy as hell. It turns sideways and then glides past the foot of my bed, and then mechanically, like it's weird, but it turned again and glided up to me, and I can't move. My heart is banging. It then leans in, and it's inches away from my face. And I really, at that point, thought my heart was going to literally explode in my chest cavities. It took its hand and put it on my chest, and he pushed me down into the bed and then physically rolled me onto my side away from him. And it leaned into my neck, and I could feel the fabric, its hat, its collar, whatever it was, on my neck and shoulder. And at that point, whether it spoke to me telepathically or whether it spoke to me in words, I don't know. But it was a deep, terrifying voice, and it more or less, and if I can imitate it, I'm not very well, but it was like, "Relax, you shall not be harmed." And that's all I remember. About 45 minutes later, I wake up, and I'm like, and I gasp for air, and I jump up, and I run, and I hit the light in the room, and I'm looking around. Then I go outside into the kitchen. My mom's already up, and I don't say anything. Kind of like the judge didn't say anything to his mom or anything. It's one of those things you're processing, and again, terror. I didn't think she'd believe me. I don't know what was going through my mind, but they didn't say anything. And as I find out later, Megan did the same thing to me. She actually had an experience before college, but didn't tell me. But then when my mother said, "Did you hear that lightning strike?" I thought for sure it hit the house. I knew I was not dreaming. Absolutely, positively knew. And that's my story. And if it happens today, I know if I get a return visit, I will die. There's no doubt in my mind, because at my age, there's no way my heart could handle something like that. But that actually became our first episode on Paranormal Road. And all the kids do tell their stories. And it's something because up until the age of the internet, I had no clue that this was real. There was one thing, that was BC years, before children. And then comes the AC years after children.
There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff for all of us that happened before children.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Nothing against you guys. Nothing against you guys.
Yeah, Megan was just a baby, and we're watching TV. Not Megan, but my ex-wife at the time, Teresa. We're watching TV, and I yell for her to come in because we're watching the Twilight Zone, and they actually have an episode there called The Shadow Man, and I was just floored because in that episode, and they recreate, the entity. It is exactly what I saw and experienced that night. And I, for years later, was convinced that this producer must have had a personal experience, because I could not believe the striking identical how they portrayed it. But again, I kept it in the back of my mind as, okay, it was freaky, it was horrible, and I kept telling myself just to move on that it was a lucid dream. I knew it wasn't, but I kind of pushed it in the back of my mind. And that's my story, and it all came to a crashing reality when I got that telephone call from Megan at Wright State that night.
So Megan, so you had never, just so before we go on with Megan, so you had never talked about this with the kids at all? Like, they didn't have a clue, and you'd never talked with your mom or your stepdad at all?
Nope.
They didn't know anything?
Nope, never told anybody in the family. I don't even, honestly, I only think I told Teresa because of what I saw in that Twilight Zone episode. That's when I had to share with her what happened to me.
Now, did you?
And as the kids would tell you, their mother, she doesn't repeat stuff. She doesn't like talking about paranormal. She doesn't want to even acknowledge existence. So it certainly is something.
She's a little bit more open-minded now. Let's be fair.
Now she is.
Now, so your mom did not say anything even after she went in and had to change her sheets, because I'm assuming you made it. I mean, listen, you can say whatever you want, but however that voice that you just said was,
right.
I mean, Jason's beard got straight, like it just went. I mean that. Okay, so before we go on, how did you even, like, the next time there was a thunderstorm, besides the part that you were always terrified of them, how did that work?
Thunderstorms in the day I was fine in the daytime, but at night, it every single time there was a storm at night, I literally just wouldn't go to bed. I'd stay up, I'd watch TV, I would pace, I would not go to bed. And even after that, it took months before I could go to sleep without a light on.
Well, I wouldn't blame you. I wouldn't blame you at all.
Yeah.
Now, Nick, you mentioned one thing, well, a couple things I wanted to ask you about. The Blackeyed Children. That subject scares me to death, but is also fascinating. So give our listeners a little background on Blackeyed Children and what they're all about.
Well, this is sort of a really weird kind of phenomenon, which didn't really begin until round about 1997, 98. So round about 20 years ago, a little bit more. But even then, it didn't really take off big time. It wasn't until sort of the early to mid-2000s, sort of 2004, 2005, 2006, when it really started to take off. And the first person who talked about this was a guy named Bryan, who lives and works in Texas. He's a full-time journalist on a newspaper, and he was involved. He was one of the first people, if not the first person, to talk about having had one of the Blackeyed Children experiences. Now, with hindsight, you can think, well, does that mean that was the first case? It doesn't. It actually doesn't. What it actually means is that Bryan was the first person to talk about it. But over the years, other people have come forward after the whole phenomenon's been talked about, and people have said, well, I saw something like this, 50 years ago when I was a kid, and and then they come forward because someone else has come forward. So it is difficult to say how old the phenomenon is, but in terms of people talking about it, it definitely was sort of, apart from Brian Bethel, it really was sort of the early 2000s, sort of 15, 16 years ago, something like that. And the Blackeyed Children, well, they're called the Blackeyed Children because their eyes are reportedly completely black, not just a sort of a larger black middle area, but the entire eyes are black. And they're kind of strange in the sense that typically they look between the ages of like about 10 and 13, and you don't really see any kind of younger than that, and you don't see any older than that. It's kind of like they're all suspended in sort of just that age, if you like, or that age period. And typically what happens is that they'll knock on people's doors late at night, and if you imagine, sort of you're watching TV at night, it's 10 o'clock, and there's suddenly a loud bang on the door. I mean, the first thing you're going to look through the spy hole on the front door, and if you see these sort of three creepy kids with like milk white skin, that's how it's described. Their skin is like literally white, and they've got these black hoodies on that they kind of push over their head so you can barely see the face. And I think they do that so you don't get a good look at the black eyes, because it's dark outside and they've got their heads down, etc., etc. And people feel compelled to open the door. Most of us, in that situation, 10, 11 o'clock at night, you see three kids in hoodies at the door. You're not going to open it to them. But the weird thing is, most of the witnesses have opened the door, and they felt in a strange way that their mind was being controlled, or kind of like a sense of hypnotism. And some of them said they actually really had to fight hard to prevent themselves from opening the door, never mind preventing the kids from coming in, but actually preventing them. One of the guys talked about how he looked at his arm with terror as his arm went towards the door to open the door, and he didn't realize what was going on because he actually wasn't doing it of his own volition, so to speak. And in the several cases, there aren't many cases where they have managed to get in, but in the cases where they have got into people's homes, the witnesses have said literally within minutes that they've started to feel sort of weak and tired and crashing like a diabetic would crash, if they hadn't had food for 10 hours or whatever, and they get the shakes and they feel ill and clammy and cold. And the witnesses have said they felt as if the Blackeyed Children were quite literally draining them of energy, kind of like a psychic vampire. And that is one of the big theories, that the Blackeyed Children are sort of like an energy vampire, and and that's one of the other interesting parallels with the vampire thing, is that they won't come into your house until you invite them in. That's why they appear to sort of hypnotize people, because unless you tell them you can come in, they stand on the door frustrated and screaming at the people, why won't you let us in, that kind of thing. So it has like a lot of parallels and overtones related to like vampires, even the old legends of vampires. And most of the people said they felt they were sort of literally being almost digested in a very strange way, but like digesting your energy, your life force,
Bryan's story, I think you can see it on Monsters and Mystery or Monsters America on demand, so on Destination America or Travel Channel. And he tells a very compelling story about how he pulled into basically a parking lot of a strip mall, and these three kids approached the car, two kids, and they asked for a ride home. And he, felt nervous about it, and he saw their eyes. And the same thing that Nick's explained, he almost let him in the car, and he knew he shouldn't. and they became more and more agitated. Like, come on, mister, just give us a ride home, you know. And then I think they even gave him some story that they couldn't get into the movie or whatever. And he was like, well, wait a minute, the parking lot's empty. I mean, there would be no movie.
See, I had never, until Nick just said it, I'd never heard that they had tried to get into people's houses. Everything I'd ever heard was they approached people in cars.
Right. No, I've heard about they do try to get in your houses. They'll knock on the door.
Are you sure these aren't the people trying to sell the magazines? Like the people drop them off in the drop them off.
But one of the things that's consistent with every story that I've heard about these black-eyed children is that they cannot come in unless you invite them, similar to like a vampire.
That's right.
So, Nick, tell us, I mean, obviously nobody has the definitive answer. For all of our listeners, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, some people say, they're aliens, but a lot of people don't realize that there isn't a single report of the black-eyed children having been seen in association with UFOs. And you might think there would be because, you see the pictures of aliens on TV and, on the net, and they're always got the large black eyes. So you would think, excuse me, would you think, they're like a cross between human and alien hybrids? That's one of the theories. But, as I said, there's not been a case where, there's an association or a connection between the black-eyed children and UFOs. But you've got other theories. I mean, some people think they're demonic creatures that can take on sort of different forms. They're not quite sort of fitting in as much as they'd want to, that kind of thing. A lot of people kind of go down that path, like the paranormal, supernatural angle, and, some of them, as I said, take the view that they are kind of literally demonic, and taking on different forms. And, it's a really weird and creepy phenomenon. And David Weatherly, a good friend of mine, David wrote sort of the definitive book on the black-eyed children, and his book's called Black-eyed Children. That's a really good book because it covers the main really good cases and also, the different theories as to what they might be.
Now, so like the story you were telling, like they got into the house. What got them out of the house? I assume the person was able to tell the story because they survived whatever encounter they had.
Well, yeah. Well, the two cases that I have where they managed to get into the house, and they managed to get in the house because the hypnotism, or whatever you want to call it, mind control, was too strong, and they felt themselves opening the door, and they did open the door, and they backed away, sat down, and the children stood in front of them, and one of them just said something like food or need food. It wasn't even like a full sentence. It was like really, as if they couldn't speak English properly. And that's when they started to feel weak and tired, as if they were being drained, and the black-eyed children were feeding on that energy. But what's interesting is that in both cases, neither of the witnesses could remember how they left the house or the apartment or whatever it was. In one case, it was an apartment. But they could not remember how, they'd left. It was almost as if like 3 or 4 minutes of their memory had just been erased, not kind of like, where you wake up in the middle of the night or whatever and fall back to sleep and, you have vague memories of doing it, but you can't remember it all. It wasn't like that. It really was the whole 10 minutes or whatever it was just gone. And they tried as hard as they could. They just could not remember anything after them coming in. And then all they could remember after that was just coming round, and with no recollection of anything else at all. So we don't, unfortunately, we don't really know what has happened or still happens in that kind of missing time period. And I don't think anybody's really got an answer for that.
Yeah, and Ken, it seems like you've actually, from reading and listening to you, you've been to a lot of these places that haven't been readily explored. So you obviously have some belief that, there are places out there where some of these creatures and cryptids could inhabit and just have never been discovered or have not been changed or disturbed in the tens of thousands or however many years they could have made it since they actually were thought to have inhabited the earth.
Yes, well, I'm always hesitant to use the word belief because that's a word that's more closely associated with faith and feelings. So I try, and I don't judge those that use that word because it's kind of a common thing in the vernacular. But as a cryptozoologist, I have an obligation to be as scientific as possible. Cryptozoology is based on traditional zoology and was founded by zoologists, and so in order to get the respect of the scientific community, we try to follow a scientific methodology. So what I tell people is that I'm convinced that there are species out there that are undiscovered. I'm convinced by the evidence. Some more promising than others. It's scientific is all about probability and weighing evidence. So, but no doubt, I mean, as you guys said, there have been many species discovered. I mean, there are literally thousands of new species described every year, but most of those are very small. But every year there's a handful of surprisingly large animals or substantially sized animals that are found in different habitats around the world. Now, most of those discoveries are made in places like Eastern Asia, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Africa, the Congo, and then South America, New Guinea, places like that where you have these vast habitats of rainforest. But there are things that are also found in occasionally in North America, Europe, and so forth. But you're right. I'm convinced that there are some of these things. Like I tell people in terms of Bigfoot, I've never seen one with my own eyes, but I'm about 90% convinced they exist because having spent my lifetime looking at the evidence, I mean, it's pretty overwhelming when you look at all of it, in my opinion. Some cryptids probably less probable because there's just not as much evidence or no physical trace evidence. So you kind of have to take each cryptid on a case-by-case basis and just kind of, delve in and look at what evidence there is. Now, the vast majority of evidence for all cryptids is anecdotal, so it's almost always eyewitness sightings, descriptions, and legends and things like that. So there's very, very little physical evidence, which is why I think many people are very skeptical, and I don't take that personally. People have a right to form their opinion based on what they see.
Well, you have obviously seen the Patterson-Gimlin film,
mm-hmm.
and you are friends, I'm assuming, with Bob. Have spoken with
mm-hmm.
him, have talked to him. Now, to me, it doesn't get any clearer evidence of what is actually out there running around as masquerading as Bigfoot, and yet other than actually having the specimen that somebody could physically study, dissect, or whatever they want to do to it, that is the most compelling evidence to me that there is, and yet that is the most torn apart, questioned,
dissected.
Yeah, dissected in a different way. So what would it really take, in your estimation, to convince people that, just in Bigfoot's case, that it really exists, other than the people that have seen it and been had their lives changed by it?
Well, at this point, it really is going to take hard physical evidence, empirical evidence, such as a body, a bone, DNA that's been, gone through the proper channels and studied by bona fide scientists. So we do have a lot of trace evidence for Bigfoot. The Patterson-Gimlin film is convincing to a lot of people. Other people look at it and kind of shrug it off and say it looks like a guy in a costume, but typically those people haven't spent a lot of time looking at it or analyzing it. But, we have a number of footprints that have been documented, photographed, measured, cast with plaster, and in terms of Bigfoot, those footprints have spanned decades all over North America, and they're very consistent. They're very convincing And I don't pretend to be a footprint expert. That would be more like, Dr. Jeff Meldrum or Cliff Barrickman, guys that have really put a lot of time into studying the footprints. But just looking at an assortment of those, they're very they're obviously much larger than human feet, much larger, averaging about 15.5 inches long, so huge. But they have a consistent design, morphology that's different than a human foot. And that keeps turning up everywhere. And they're usually found in very remote areas. So the skeptics that want to argue, well, people are faking those. Well, maybe in some cases, but if you find a random set of Bigfoot tracks up in the wilderness, I mean, what are the odds that someone went up there thinking that they were going to be found?
Yeah, what's the odds that Shaquille O'Neal's up there in his bare feet?
Yeah, walking around,
stomping
and also
around, hoping that somebody's going to come across his. And then he's really going to play it. That's really going to be a great trick.
Know. I mean,
well, the other thing you have to consider is if someone said, "Well, look, I'm going to try to use a fake foot, and we're going to make a model," you're subject to weather conditions and the degradation of the sample anyway. So, I mean, I was and an aside, I found a black bear print at Malabar State Farm in Mansfield. Well, there shouldn't be black bears there. So I took a picture of it and I sent it to ODNR, and they said, yeah, that's a black bear print. Where'd you see that, Pennsylvania? I go, no, I'm in Mansfield. They're like, well, there shouldn't be a black bear there. Well, I said, I know that. So I came back a couple days later, and of course that print was completely gone. Weatherhead or other people had trampled it.
So the person that was trying to play a trick on you that made the fake black bear, they were
Let's
hoping
put it this way,
that you got that.
I didn't gamble that it was a fake print.
Oh, geez.
Well, it's because of people's attitudes like this is the reason why I really appreciate how you take a scientific approach towards your investigations, as well as how when you put them in the books and everything. I like how it's irrefutable. What details and what information you do provide, it's laid out in a scientific manner. So therefore, that eliminates a lot of the argument.
In the legal system, we have something that's called the best evidence rule. So at trials, when people are trying to make decisions of one way or the other, they have to look at the evidence, and we have a rule. It's called best evidence rule. And if you want to try to persuade somebody of something, you have to present the best evidence. And, to me, eyewitness testimony is the best evidence. And, we're not trying to necessarily take a criminal point of view, say, well, you have to prove something beyond reasonable doubt. In civil cases, it's just preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not. And I think based upon all the eyewitnesses that obviously probably you've talked to and people's talked to, that the preponderance of the evidence is that there are these things out there.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that eyewitness testimony is, particularly skeptics will quickly disregard it and say, there's a whole barrage of excuses they use. Well, eyewitness testimony is unreliable and people can't remember things properly or fill in the dots. But the thing is, looking at a big picture, when you have corroborating eyewitness testimony, so that is you're interviewing people from, that don't know each other from different places, and their physical descriptions are similar, and that's what you have in terms of Bigfoot. Again, you have thousands now of eyewitness sightings that have been documented through the decades, and the descriptions are almost all identical. So I mean, if people were making up stories, they might be prone to change or embellish or put their own, fingerprints on a particular description. So that's, and also multiple eyewitness testimonies, and those are really exciting to me when you have, 2 or 3 or more eyewitnesses that encounter a cryptid or see something, and their testimonies are all consistent. That I'm sure that's similar in the legal system as well. So,
and the credibility of the witnesses, that carries a lot of weight as well.
I appreciate that. Getting just one more thing, just to address the North American Dogman Project. I did not start that. That was started by Jody Cook and, he's going to kill me, another guy, I forgot his name right off the bat, but they're the ones that started. That was their focus because no one else had it. Everybody had the Bigfoot stuff, but no one was talking about Dogman. And initially, I got to be honest, when I heard Dogman, my buddy Al said, dude, you got to listen to this. You got to hear this stuff. I'm like, werewolves? Really? Because I thought it was, I got to be honest, thought it was crap. No such thing as werewolves. And then you start listening to it. And then you start interviewing people individually outside of this, off the record that work military or some other end of the, where they have more to lose than gain. And you start hearing things, you start questioning, and then you have your own experiences, and you're like, okay, so there's a werewolf now. That's something I wanted to know was true or not.
Right. Well, let's get into it. Talk to us about the North American Dogman project, and what you have learned, from your research.
Well, when you hear about people talking about this cryptid creature, and Judge, I did hear your story. Thanks. Shane sent me an episode where you told your story, which was pretty fascinating, and I'm gonna probably say you got very lucky that day because you were being, I think in general, you were being pursued by that creature that came out of the woods, and you said that it looked like Anubis,
Yep.
And that is the greatest definition, explanation. If people really want to know, there's two things I say to people regarding, well, what's a dogman? Dogman is a name given by Linda Godfrey, Land Between the Lakes, frame and all that stuff, because they said it looked like a dog on its hind legs. It's basically a werewolf, a lichen, or it looks something like the Van Helsing creature of werewolves, or American Werewolf in London type of werewolf, or it has an Anubis type quality to it, where you have this big, muscular body that's almost a bipedal, human-esque with lots of hair and claws, and this head of a dog, German Shepherd, or something of the like, hyena, German Shepherd, that type of thing.
And being a student of early Wolfman movies with Lon Chaney, when I saw this thing, it never resonated with me, werewolf, because I imagined the flat face of a man and wearing a tattered plaid shirt and a pair of jeans, running around. And so for years, I secretly researched what in the heck was it that I saw. Never once thought werewolf.
Are you sure it wasn't Robert?
Right.
He couldn't run that fast, trust me.
Oh, geez, for short periods of time.
Because you people throughout time have talked and discussed Bigfoot, Sasquatch. The indigenous people throughout the world have discussed Sasquatch. I mean, that's always been at the forefront of this type of cryptid thing. A bipedal, hairy man with apish quality to it, or in that realm, that lives in the woods. No one's really discussed publicly that there's this creature that's kind of wolf-esque or hyena-esque, and has the shape and body of a man. It really wasn't discussed that much. But as more and more of these sightings are coming out, now it's the new, in thing. It's the hot potato. This is what people are seeing. Now, I'm going to go so far to say that of the sightings you hear reported, I'm going to give it an 80-20 split. 80% are probably real sightings, and 20% are hyperbole on this cryptid. This cryptid varies in like 7 different variants that's been broken down into about 7 variants, from something that looks like a type 1, which is like a canine-looking variant, really like a wolf. Think wolf, werewolf, like a dog werewolf. Those type 2 variant, which is more hyena-esque, to a 3 type variant, which is more like that wolf, werewolf in Van Helsing, that werewolf soldier that's like 12 feet tall. There's also ones that look a little bit like, I'm going to say like a combination of a cheetah and a leopard, or something to that effect. And then you get into the type 3 variants, which run the gamut from like a deformed Bigfoot monkey to a baboon. with the middle one being really, really evil-looking mad dog. And it depends on where you are and what you're looking at, because I always thought initially when you're going out into this field, there's going to be variations of these things anyhow. It's in human nature. Like, look, we're more Caucasian in this country than, let's say, in Asia. There's certain different breaks down different characteristics. So throughout human history, there's going to be certain changes that distinguish us from each other. But ultimately, they're all lumped into the Dogman category because it acts more like that werewolf.
So are you saying there was more like breeds? Like in canines, we have different breeds. That in the Dogman phenomena, there's different breeds of Dogman.
I think there are not only different breeds, or we'll call them variants because that's what they've been using, but there's also different roles and different stages. See, a lot of the Dogman stories we hear, first of all, Dogmen in general, they don't hunt alone. So that's why I said you got lucky. You were running, when you were running and you were doing the pacing, you're hearing this thing keeping pace with you. It was no effort for this creature to keep pace with you.
Right.
At all.
Absolutely.
At all. I mean, it's insane what these things can do. These things can leap 60 feet without even thinking about it. But in general, if you have a Dogman, if you come up on a road, you're walking in the woods, you're hunting, whatever it is, and you come up and this thing steps out in front of you, I will guarantee you have one behind you or one creeping around to behind you. They never, ever are alone.
That was the theory. That was a theory that when years later I was on an airplane actually talking to some guy who had actually hunted wolves, and that was his theory. Yep. He's like, look, you were being pushed. His thing was, wolves don't like to attack anything of size by themselves. They're scared they'd get hurt, not be able to run with the pack. And so what his theory was, this thing was pushing me towards the pack, or however big the pack was. And and I was very lucky that I turned right and went to my buddy's house versus turned left, because if I'd have turned left, I probably would. They would have ran me right into it.
Yeah, that what they like to do is they like to steer in that direction. You were perfect prey. You were a runner. You're lean. It's all muscle. There's very little fat on you, right?
Not anymore.
Let's talk.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, so as far as animal smelling protein and stuff like that, yeah, I'd have been easy.
Right now, he's probably feeding the whole pack for at least 2 months. But I want to ask, and maybe this is a question that some of our listeners that are not familiar with this subject. So, do you believe that the Dogman, then, we're talking about a creature that solely exists as a Dogman type creature, not the one that we've seen in the movies,
not metamorphosing from man.
Yeah, this isn't
some
isn't some curse that somebody turns into. Which is, we can do another Seinfeld reference where Jerry shaves his chest and and it grows back in and he becomes can't stop the scratching and itching. But is that what we're talking? We're talking about this is
biological creature.
Yeah, biological creature that when we call it Dogman, it's only because it appears to
be bipedal.
Bipedal, not that it's half man.
Or is it?
Well, I think that when you get into the subject of these cryptids, these Dogmen, the physical, the physical traits of these things, as well as into the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, I think you're almost getting like a missing link type of thing here. I think there is a development. There may have been a crossover between the human gene and these things that created this end of the creature. Maybe this was created prior to humans, and we are the end result of genetic manipulation. I don't know. That's a theory, okay? But I think that if we had hairs from this creature, definitive hairs, like someone grabbed a whole bunch of it while it was being attacked, and here, I got these hairs from it. I think you would find that the DNA and RNA in it had some human qualities to it, where you'd say, well, I'm getting human. And it would be something there that says, well, I'm getting human stuff, but I'm also getting dog stuff, so you probably had something rub up against you. I think there is something to this cryptid that has a human quality. I definitely believe this thing does not transform.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.